Hello, Year 5. We're on to the next couple of chapters of Skellig. I hope you enjoyed the last two chapters. Those Vipers questions were based on the first chapter. The first question was, where does Michael find the man? And of course, he was found in that... Oops, wrong page. Oops. Very first line, I found him in the garage on a Sunday afternoon. The second question, explain what happened to Ernie Myers, who used to own the house. Well, Ernie Myers had lived there for years on his own and had died there in the kitchen and was found under the table. Then, a vocabulary question, the phrase, see it with your mind's eye, which Mr. Stone, the estate agent, comes out with. Obviously, you don't have eyes in your head or in your mind. However, if you were to close your eyes, you can visualise something quite clearly based on the experience that you have of life. So that's what that means. Okay, we're on to chapter 3 and 4 today. And here are the Vipers questions for chapters 3 and 4. An inference question, what tells you that Michael's mum is an optimistic person? A prediction question, what does the last paragraph suggest will happen next? And what makes you think this? And can you summarise in no more than 4 sentences the story so far to someone else in your house? See if you can do it in a way that's persuasive and makes them want to read too. Okay, chapter 3. The garden was another place that was supposed to be wonderful. There were going to be benches and a table and a swing. There were going to be goalposts painted on one of the walls by the house. There was going to be a pond with fish and frogs in it, but there was none of that. There were just nettles and thistles and weeds and half bricks and lumps of stone. I stood there kicking the heads off a million dandelions. After a while, Mum shouted, was I coming in for lunch? And I said, no, I was staying in the garden. She brought me a sandwich and a can of Coke. Sorry it's all so rotten and we're all in such rotten moods, she said. She touched my arm. You understand, though, don't you, Michael? Don't you? I shrugged. Yes, I said. She touched me again and sighed. It'll be great again when everything's sorted out, she said. I sat on a pile of bricks against the house wall. I ate the sandwich and drank the Coke. I thought of Random Road, where we'd come from, and all my old mates like Leaky and Coot. They'd be up on the top field now, playing a match that'd last all day. Then I heard the doorbell ringing and heard Dr. Death coming in. I called him Dr. Death because his face was grey and there were black spots on his hands and he didn't know how to smile. I'd seen him lighting up a fag in his car one day as he drove away from our door. They told me to call him Dr. Dan, and I did when I had to speak to him, but inside he was Dr. Death to me, and it fitted him much better. I finished the Coke, waited a minute, then I went down to the garage again. I didn't have time to dare myself or to stand there listening to the scratching. I switched the torch on, took a deep breath and tiptoed straight inside. Something little and black scuttled across the floor. The door creaked and cracked for a moment before it was still. Dust poured through the torch beam. Something scratched and scratched in a corner. I tiptoed further in and felt spiderwebs breaking on my brow. Everything was packed in tight, ancient furniture, kitchen units, rolled-up carpets, pipes and crates and planks. I kept ducking down under the hose pipes and ropes and kit bags that hung from the roof. More cobwebs snapped on my clothes and skin. The floor was broken and crumbly. I opened a cupboard an inch, shone the torch in, and saw a million woodlice scattering away. I peered down into a great stone jar and saw the bones of some little animal that had died in there. Dead blue bottles were everywhere. There were ancient newspapers and magazines. I shone the torch onto one and saw that it came from nearly 50 years ago. I moved so carefully. I was scared every moment that the whole thing was going to collapse. There was dust clogging my throat and nose. I knew they'd be yelling for me soon, and I knew I'd better get out. I leaned across a heap of tea chests and shone the torch into the space behind, and that's when I saw him. I thought he was dead. He was sitting with his legs stretched out and his head tipped back against the wall. He was covered in dust and webs like everything else, and his face was thin and pale. Dead blue bottles were scattered on his hair and shoulders. I shone the torch on his white face and his black suit. "What do you want?" he said. He opened his eyes and looked up at me. His voice squeaked like he hadn't used it in years. What do you want?" My heart thudded and thundered. I said, "What do you want?" When I heard him yelling for me from the house, when I heard them yelling for me from the house, "Michael, Michael, Michael!" I shuffled out again, backed out through the door. It was Dad. He came down the path to me. "Didn't we tell you?" he started. "Yes," I said. "Yes, yes." I started to brush the dust off myself. A spider dropped away from my chin on a long string. He put his arm around me. "It's for your own good," he said. He picked a dead blue bottle out of my hair. He thumped the side of the garage and the whole thing shuddered. "See?" he said. "Imagine what might happen." I grabbed his arm to stop him thumping it again. "Don't," I said. "It's all right, I understand." He squeezed my shoulder and said everything would be better soon. He laughed. "Get all that dust off before your mother sees, eh?" Chapter 4. I hardly slept that night. Every time I did drop off, I saw him coming out of the garage door and coming through the wilderness to the house. I saw him in my bedroom. I saw him come right to the bed. I stood there all dusty and white with the dead blue bottles all over him. "What do you want?" he whispered. I said, "What do you want?" I told myself I was stupid. I'd never seen him at all. That had all been part of a dream as well. I lay there in the dark. I heard Dad snoring, and when I listened hard, I could hear the baby breathing. Her breathing was cracked and hissy. In the middle of the night, when it was pitch black, I dropped off again, but she started bawling. I heard Mum getting up to feed her. I heard Mum's voice cooing and comforting. Then there was just silence again, and Dad snoring again. I listened hard for the baby again, and I couldn't hear her. It was already getting light when I got up and tiptoed into their room. Her cot was beside their bed. They were lying fast asleep with their arms around each other. I looked down at the baby. I slipped my hand under the covers and touched her. I could feel her heart beating fast. I could feel the thin rattle of her breath and her chest rising and falling. I felt how hot it was in there, how soft her bones were, how tiny she was. There was a dribble of spit and milk on her neck. I wondered if she was going to die. They'd been scared about that in the hospital. Before they let her come home, she'd been in a glass case with tubes and wires sticking in her, and we'd stood around staring in like she was in a fish tank. I took my hand away and tucked the covers around her again. Her face was dead white with her hair, and her hair was dead black. They'd told me I had to keep praying for her, but I didn't know what to pray. "Hurry up and get strong if you're going to," I whispered. Mum half woke and saw me there. "What do you want, love?" she whispered. She stretched her hand out of the bed towards me. "Nothing," I whispered and tiptoed back into my room. I looked down into the wilderness. There was a blackbird singing away on the garage roof. I thought of him lying behind the tea chests with the cobwebs in his hair. What was he doing there? Okay, there we go. Chapter 5 next time, 5 and 6. So remember those Vipers questions. What tells you that Michael's mum is an optimistic person? What does the last paragraph suggest will happen next? And what makes you think this? And in no more than 4 sentences, can you summarise the story so far for someone else in your house? Have a talk about those questions and think of some answers before we discuss them next time around. Okay, bye.